Imagine retiring at 55 with everything the plan said you needed, and discovering 5 years later that the money runs out before you do. For people who use the wrong number, that is not a worst-case scenario. That is just the math. Almost nobody who plans early retirement catches the mistake in time, not because they were careless, because they left out the one variable that changes everything. There is also a risk hiding inside early retirement that almost nobody talks about. It has ended more early retirement plans than any market crash or bad investment ever has. That risk comes back around shortly. But first, here is the variable most people miss. Early retirement is not just about saving enough. It is about survival, not whether the money lasts 10 years, whether it lasts 40. And a 40-year retirement is a completely different challenge than the one most people have been planning for. Most people planning early retirement have heard of the 4% rule. It is the most widely cited rule of thumb in retirement planning, simple, memorable, and backed by serious research. But there is a version of that rule that almost nobody mentions. The 4% rule was built on research covering 30-year retirement periods. 30 years, not 40, not 45. For someone retiring at 65, a 30-year horizon makes sense. For someone retiring at 55, it does not. When the research is extended to cover a 40-year retirement, the safe withdrawal rate drops to closer to 3%. That single percentage point sounds like a rounding error. It is not. On a $1 million portfolio, 4% produces $40,000 a year. 3% produces $30,000. That is a $10,000 per year shortfall, and that gap does not stay at $10,000. It compounds, year after year, quietly eroding the base of the portfolio during the years when the damage is hardest to reverse. Someone who retires at 55 using the 4% rule without adjusting for the actual length of their retirement may feel financially comfortable at 60. At 65, the picture looks different, and by then, the options for correcting course are far more limited than they were before the decision was made. The numbers required for early retirement reflect this reality, and they are larger than most people expect. For someone spending $80,000 a year, the required portfolio at a 3.5% withdrawal rate is approximately $2.3 million. For someone spending $60,000 a year, the required portfolio is approximately $1.7 million. These figures are before accounting for 3 additional variables that early retirement introduces, variables that a traditional retirement beginning at 65 does not face in the same way. The first is the sequence of returns risk, which is most damaging in the first decade of retirement. The second is the healthcare gap that exists before Medicare begins. And the third is the impact of early retirement on Social Security. Each of these adds to the total capital required. Together, they explain why early retirement demands a fundamentally different financial model than the standard planning frameworks provide. If this kind of analysis is useful to you, take a second right now to hit the like button and subscribe. It helps more people find content like this, and there is a lot more coming. Now for the risk that was flagged at the beginning. It is not a market crash. It is not a sequence of bad investment decisions. It is lifestyle inflation in the first 5 years of not working. Early retirement attracts a particular kind of person, motivated, disciplined, and accustomed to optimizing their outcomes. These are people who saved aggressively, modeled their spending carefully, and retired with what looks on paper like a solid and well-constructed plan. Then the first 5 years happen. Travel that was modeled at $10,000 a year costs $25,000 because retirement travel is different from vacation travel. A home renovation that was not in the plan arrives in year 2. Adult children need financial help at a moment when the portfolio is no longer being replenished by a salary. A health issue, not catastrophic, just persistent, creates out-of-pocket costs that were underestimated in the original model. Each of these individually is manageable. Together, compounded over 5 years of portfolio withdrawals that exceed the planned rate during the window when the portfolio is most vulnerable, they can permanently impair the plan's ability to survive 40 years. According to Morningstar's 2025 research on retirement spending, retirees whose portfolios incurred losses in the first 5 years were significantly more likely to run out of money over a 30-year horizon, even compared to retirees with identical long-term spending patterns but better early returns. The most common cause of early retirement failure is not a bad investment or a catastrophic market event. It is spending modestly above the sustainable withdrawal rate consistently in the years when the portfolio base is largest and the compounding damage is greatest. The practical defense against this failure pattern is a spending floor and a spending ceiling, not just an average. The floor represents the minimum required to cover essential costs: housing, food, healthcare, utilities. The ceiling represents the maximum that can be spent in any given year without exceeding the sustainable withdrawal rate. In years where the portfolio performs well, there is room to move toward the ceiling. In years where it underperforms, spending pulls back toward the floor. This dynamic adjustment, rather than a fixed annual withdrawal regardless of market conditions, is the approach that financial planning research consistently finds produces the highest probability of portfolio survival over a 40-year horizon. Healthcare deserves its own section because it is the variable that early retirement modeling most frequently and most consequentially underestimates. A retirement beginning at 65 arrives at Medicare eligibility on day 1. A retirement beginning at 55 does not reach Medicare for a decade. That decade has a cost that most early retirement models do not fully account for. According to Bolden data from 2025, ACA marketplace premiums for someone aged 55 to 64 averaged between $700 and $1,200 a month. For a couple retiring together at 55, that is potentially $14,000 to $29,000 a year in premiums alone, before deductibles, copays, or any out-of-pocket costs. Over that decade, a couple could face $140,000 to $290,000 in health insurance costs. That money comes directly from the portfolio during exactly the years when the sequence of returns risk is highest. A dedicated healthcare bridge fund, sized to cover premiums and realistic out-of-pocket costs for the full 10 years before Medicare begins, is not an optional line item. It is a requirement, and it must appear in the model before the retirement decision is finalized. There is also the question of what early retirement does to a Social Security benefit, and it is a question that most early retirement planning frameworks handle poorly. The Social Security benefit is calculated based on the highest 35 earning years of a person's career. Retiring at 50 instead of 60 means 10 fewer high-earning years in that calculation. For most people in their 50s, those are the highest earning years of their career. Removing them permanently reduces the benefit, and that reduction compounds with the claiming age decision. Someone who retires at 50 and claims Social Security at 62 faces a double reduction, a lower calculated benefit from the shorter working history, and a permanent 30% reduction from claiming before full retirement age. The combined effect can reduce lifetime Social Security income by hundreds of thousands of dollars compared to someone who worked until 60 and claimed at full retirement age. For a retirement that needs to last 40 years, that is a gap the portfolio has to cover, adding further pressure to the withdrawal rate during exactly the period when the portfolio is most exposed. If you find this video useful, subscribe for more content that helps you build a retirement plan that actually works. The decisions you make in the next few years will matter enormously. None of this is an argument against early retirement. For people who have genuinely modeled the numbers correctly, a portfolio sized for 40 years rather than 30, a spending plan stress-tested against realistic surprises rather than optimistic assumptions, a healthcare strategy that accounts for the full pre-Medicare period, and a clear understanding of the Social Security impact, Early retirement is achievable and deeply rewarding. The research on healthy life expectancy makes a compelling case for capturing the active years of retirement as early as possible. A retirement that begins at 55 with the right financial foundation can provide a decade of high-quality active years that a retirement beginning at 65 simply cannot recover. The math is not here to discourage anyone. It is here to make sure the decision is made with the right numbers rather than the wrong ones. The people who retire early and stay retired are almost always those who ran the honest numbers, sized the portfolio correctly for the actual length of their retirement, planned for the costs that optimistic models leave out, and entered the transition with a realistic picture of what their money actually needs to do. The people who discover the plan has failed are almost always those who ran the optimistic numbers and found out, in year 3 or year 5, that the one variable they missed had been working against them the entire time. That variable is not obscure. It is not complicated. It is simply the length of time the money needs to last and the withdrawal rate that length demands. Getting that number right before the decision is made is the difference between an early retirement that holds and one that does not. The best time to run those numbers honestly was before the plan was finalized. The second best time is right now.